Hey guys, welcome to another lesson here at THSS Technology. Today we're going to finally dive back into Blender, having a look at Blender 2.8, a big new release. And we're going to start off today by looking at how to create a very simple low poly landscape, which will coincide nicely with the project that you're all working on right now in class. It'll give you an idea of some of the new features in Blender 2.8 as opposed to 2.79, which all of our old videos were recorded in. And it'll help you kind of get a head start on what you should be working over the next couple weeks. So let's get started. So I'm going to start here with my intro scene, and I'm going to have a clean plate. So I'm going to press A to select all, then I'm going to hit delete and clear off my scene. I'm then going to add a new mesh by pressing Shift A, go over to mesh, and let's add a plane. Let's hit S to scale up that plane a little bit. That looks pretty good. And now we're going to head over to edit mode so we can start editing this mesh. So I'm going to hit tab to go to edit mode. I've selected the entire face, and we're going to right click on that, and we are going to subdivide, okay? And then we're going to right click and we're going to subdivide it again, and again, and again, and again, and again. That should be good. Now you don't want to subdivide it too much. Anytime you subdivide, you're creating new geometry, new edges, new vertices, and vertices rather. And if you do it too often, it'll actually crash your computer. So you want to be careful on how often you are subdividing your mesh here. Excellent, so I think that's a good starting point. But now what we want to do is we want to take all these subdivisions, which are little squares, and triangulate the faces and turn them into, well, triangles. So with all my faces selected, and once again, if you just click A, it'll select all, I'm going to hit Control T to triangulate our faces. Perfect. Okay, so now let's get started by creating our first mountain. So I'm going to make sure I'm in vertex selection mode, and I'm just going to select a place where I want to put my mountain. Not quite in the center, a little bit off to the back a bit. And I want to raise that mountain out of the ground. Now if I just press G for grab and then Z and raise it up, it's only going to raise kind of that like one vertex and all the vertices that are kind of attached to it. And that's a pretty lousy mountain. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on a feature called proportional editing. And it's going to edit the area proportionately around your selected point. So proportional editing is up here at the top. The shortcut key is O. We can turn that on so it goes blue. And now when I hit G and Z, it's going to pull up everything around that circle. Now it's kind of hard to see the circle on the screen. There's actually like a brush circle that you might recognize from Photoshop. And if I roll my mouse wheel, the circle is going to get bigger and we're going to pull up a larger area of the mountain, right? Or conversely, you can go smaller. So you want to kind of create a general mountain size and shape. Excellent. Well, I have my mountain there, but frankly, it's a little bit boring. It's flat and round, looks more like a foothill rather than a mountain. And I mean, if you're going for an extremely weathered look, like the rain's really beating it down and smoothed out the mountain, you can leave it like that if you really wanted to. But let's spice it up a little bit and add some interesting dynamic shapes and edges to this mountain. So next to the proportional editing button, here's the proportional editing settings, where you can change the way in which the edit affects it. So I'm going to set it to random. So that is going to randomize what is being proportionally edited. So with that same top point selected, I'm going to press G and then Z. And if you notice now, as I start dragging it up, it's going to proportionally edit a larger area. All right, that's looking pretty good there. If I a bit more, it's going to start affecting the ground around it, which is kind of an interesting thing you might want to do. All right, that looks pretty good, and that looks a lot better now, right? So we have kind of like little foothills near the bottom here going up to a much more jagged peak. Then if you wanted to, you could select, like a place over here, for example, G and Z, and just raise it up a little bit to kind of rough up the ground. So it's not a completely flat landscape. Maybe one more point here. Right, so now we have a little bit more interesting texture on our ground itself. Excellent. Okay, so this is looking a little bit better, but maybe now we want to create like a lake or a river or a stream or something along those lines, which is pretty easy to do. So if we go back and start selecting a bunch of vertexes now, we can kind of create a river system. And you can use the circle selection tool here to do this. I'm just holding down Shift and clicking, but you're welcome to use the circle selector. And I'm just going to kind of create a river system that's kind of leading off the map here. And then maybe we'll select a larger area here to create kind of like a lake. Excellent. Now if I hit G and then Z, now you don't want to do too much because that's really going to be weird, but let's scale this down to a much smaller amount here. Perfect. Now we have kind of like a trench system that's kind of being built in there. Now you might think that doesn't really look like water, it just looks like a canyon, which you might be going for. But if we exit out of edit mode, deselect, and I'm going to press Shift A, and let's add another plane. All right, so we take this plane and just lower it a little bit, and scale it. Now you got the illusion of there's a watery surface in that area. Excellent. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now we can go about and start adding some color into our scene. Now we went over materials and how to add materials in Blender 2.8, so let's just do a quick refresher on that. So I'm going to start by selecting my mountain here. I'm going to go over to the material tab here on the right, and let's create a new material, and let's just give it a greeny color. Okay, let's darken that up a little bit. That looks excellent. Now you're not going to see that, so we're going to press Z, and we're going to change the view mode to material preview. Yours might say look dev, which is on one of the older versions of Blender, but essentially you want the one at the bottom. It'll probably say look dev, or it'll say material preview. Excellent. And that's kind of what our materials are looking like. I think that green's a little bit too bright, so let's darken up a little bit more. Excellent. Now let's go over to the water, and let's add a new one for the water now. Let's make the water blue for obvious reasons. Okay, that's looking pretty nice. But it doesn't make a lot of sense that the mountain's all the same color. So let's fix this issue now. So I'm going to select our terrain texture here. I'm going to press Tab to go back into edit mode. And I'm going to press 1 on my keypad to go to a side view. And that's going to allow us to see a perfect little side view of our 3D model. And what I want to do now is I want to select the mountain, not the grass, but all of the mountain here. But if I press B for box select and I drag out a selection, it's going to select only one side of the mountain, which isn't what we want. We want it to select everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on wireframe mode. So I'm going to press Z. You remember this, we went over this before. And let's go to wireframe mode. So now if I go to face selection, press B and do a click drag, it's going to select the entire mountain. So now what we can do is we can go over here to the materials tab. We can press the plus button to add a new material. So let's go to new, and let's create this kind of like a gray shape. And then we'll click the assign button, and then let's go press Z again and go back to material preview. And now our mountain has a more rocky looking texture. And then for a final thing, let's go to Z, let's go to wireframe, B for box select. Let's select the top of the mountain. Let's create a new material, and let's make it nice and bright and white, and then click assign. Change it back to material preview. And now we have the start of our low poly mountain scene. All right, next lesson we'll go into how to set up a camera, how to set up lighting, and create a really neat depth of field effect. But that's all for today, and we will see you all later.